I think I finally listened to that and took the leap 2.5 years ago to carve my own path. I think more broadly in the last 5 years, I've been just deeply curious about what does this mean by the future of work. And I've really been trying to explore that in a very open-minded, long-term way. Like, there's a lot of quote unquote thought leaders around the future of work who have their take and this is what's wrong with work and here's how we fix it. I just am not totally sure on any of my takes. And I think when you are intellectually honest and explore these things, they go all the way down to kind of deeper fundamental human principles, which are really hard to make sense of. And I think I'm really on a many, many year journey of trying to figure out what all these things are, experimenting my own life, and seeing how I can help other people kind of grapple with all these questions.
Mm, nice. Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that humility. Um, so so how do you position, like, what's the strategy of positioning yourself as somebody who knows what they're talking about? Like you have to sell yourself in some capacity because you like want people to trust your expertise. So it seems like finding a balance between that sort of selling your wares and also having this humility um, component as well. What's that? What does that balance look like for you?
I think the short answer is I've probably not done a good job of getting hired, right? I, I, I think to get hired, if you want to make money now and work with big corporates who can pay you a lot, you need to have a very definite take and a very practical solution for big organizations.
Yeah.
I think some of the solutions that I've been interested in are might undermine organizations,
Uh,
like something like the 4-day work week, things like that. Um, so I don't know if your framing of the question is correct. Like, I don't
mm,
have a strategy, right?
mm,
My strategy is really to kind of learn and continue to learn. It's like playing the infinite game of learning. I
mm.
think that has not led me down a path that is optimized for earnings or success in any easy to measure way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but feels like a journey I want to keep staying
Mm. What is it optimized for, if not those things?
on. I don't know. Probably play,
Uh-huh.
um, leisure. I know somebody commented in the Twitter thread before they wanted comments on laziness. I think leisure it is a word that is really interesting. If you go into it, leisure did not mean just flopping around for
Uh-huh.
most of our modern Western history.
Yeah.
It meant something more active. It meant contemplating life. It meant basically actively pursuing things you're fully engaged in.
Uh,
So I think pursuing leisure in that sense is what I'm excited about. Helping others, trying to figure out ways to be generous, experimenting with different ways of working, and probably around those things. And then also just spending time with family and uh, trying to be present.
is money something that you worry about?
No, other people worry about it on my behalf. Um,
Like who?
Parents, family, um, people I talk to. I think
Yeah.
people are like, I'd love to follow your path. And then I say, are you comfortable making less? They're like, I want to make kind of what I'm making now, probably more. I'm like, okay, I don't know how to do that. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm coming from the business world where like I was making a healthy 6 figures and it's a very comfortable life. Um, and the work's not that hard. You kind of know what you're doing after a certain point, and once you've gotten one or two of these type of jobs, you there's enough of these other jobs that you can kind of hang around for a while. I'm a bit crazy in terms of blowing that up because I both liked and was good at my work. I just had a suspicion that I had these deeper creative drives, and there's got to be more than working 5 days a week, 48 hours a week, 48 weeks a year, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm. So what is it that you're doing now differently
Yeah.
than what you were doing at your normal corporate job?
Yeah, so when I left consulting, my conception of taking my own path was to just become a freelance consultant. I really just had a lack of imagination. I put out I created this brand, Vivo Strategies, and this was just going to be Paul Millard, freelance consultant. I was going to do pretty much the same thing as before,
Mm-hmm.
and a little more flexibility in life.
And consulting on what exactly?
Right.
Because consulting is such a I actually love the term because I think you can
Yeah,
infuse it with whatever the fuck you want. But
it's great.
what is it that you were consulting on?
Yeah, I mean, try translating consultant to Chinese and then telling people you're that, and they're like, uh, "Butchitao," I don't know. Um, and so prior, I was doing like talent development and CEO succession and leadership assessments and board effectiveness strategy and helping CEOs transition into new roles. So essentially, what a consultant does is go in, gather a ton of information, interview people who don't ordinarily talk to each other or go this deep around a structured set of questions. You disappear, you try to make sense of what you're hearing, pull it all together, give them frameworks and models to make decisions and a better perspective of what's really going on such that they can move forward. You also kind of pull in external perspectives. Perhaps you've worked with other companies, or as the consultant, you can go to those companies and ask them insights on how they're running their business, right? So it's a form of like uh, spying in nicer clothes.
Mm,
Um, so, or maybe not as nice clothes, depending on the spy. But yeah, that's the core of it, right? So when went solo as a independent consultant, you're basically taking that skill set and applying it to any problem. So a lot of small companies, for example, need consultants because it's just harder to hire full-time employees.
mm,
The biggest advantage I've found in the projects that actually come through are the ones where they need someone like tomorrow,
mm,
right? I need somebody tomorrow that understands business, can do good work with minimal supervision, and help me think strategically about something, right?
mm,
Um, so the independent consultant is much more hands-on than like high-level strategy advice, right? So you're often co-creating things, taking part-time roles in a organization or institute or things like that. So
mm,
as a freelance consultant, I've probably had 20 different gigs and 20 different modes of being and types of work. So it's really hard to say, right?
mm, mm,
Um, Recently, I've been doing a lot of presentation coaching with senior executives.
mm,
Um, and it's more than presentation coaching. It's probably um, coaching around confidence and communication. It's coaching around how to think about strategy and communicate with boards and
mm,
CEOs or other senior business people. It's sharing of insights of other projects I've worked on and things like that, right?
mm,
Um, so that's really what freelance consulting is about.
mm.
I might have left you more confused now.
No, I'm trying to figure out what I wanted to zoom in on. One thing I'm interested in is the presentation coaching. Like, is that I've done a little bit of that myself, and most of it, when I try and apply models to it, I end up just confusing myself and the other
Mm.
person. Like that sort of that type of coaching feels pretty intuitive to me. What's your approach to it?
Yeah, so This is something that's emerged as paying my bills now. And the reason I've kind of stepped away from strategy consulting is I started helping people with communication and presentation skills and approaching problems. Basically, the toolkit I learned at like McKinsey and Company
Uh-huh.
10 years ago, and got really good at this in consulting. Started being a facilitator and teaching training at the consulting firms and advising an undergrad group. I helped a company develop a strategy consulting skills training program. And then last year, turned this into an online course.
Mm.
So, really, it's not when you're helping somebody create a better presentation, what you're actually doing is helping them think better, right?
Mm.
So you're going back to the thinking. Because of the way we work online now, we go from like informational article about cats and we copy paste that into a presentation about cats,
Mm.
right? We're actually missing a step where we take all the different articles, put it down, maybe offline, print it out, write it out, and kind of structure. Okay, what are the key insights here? What are the takeaways? Then how do you organize that information in a way that's both compelling for the human brain and makes your argument?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really these approaches to thinking about argument, structure, persuasion, and presentation, tying those all together and helping people with that.
Mm.
So the way I do it is kind of co-creating things where I'm both teaching the principles behind it and working through it with people. I was recently working with the president of a company and we were basically doing it live on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was moving the pieces around and trying to basically listening, right? Listening at its best with some logic or structure behind it and
Mm-hmm.
trying to make sense of what she was saying and kind of going back and forth while also explaining here's why I'm doing this.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. So where is this go? Where's this going? I kind of want to get back to the future part. And I know you
Yeah,
have
we
this like
we
this
can
like
bounce back.
I know you have this like epistemic humility about you, but like what are some trends that you're noticing at least in um we could maybe start with your field and your area of expertise and abstract from there if we want to.
Yeah, so I mean prior to doing the leadership stuff, I was doing organizational change consulting. And so I've always been fascinated with trying to understand what is happening in the workplace, what is happening in work, what is the future of work. Before that term was hot, probably 5, 6 years ago. Um, so I was mentioning to you before I wrote this article, the future of work is really 5 conversations.
Mm.
So I break it down into 5 things. I'll break those down really quick. One is basically the trends happening to us. Everyone's seen this article. The robots are coming, they're taking our jobs, right?
Yeah, right.
2 is about the gig economy. There's the good and bad. There's the Uber's destroying people's lives, and the other side of that, gig economy is unleashing personal creativity and freedom, right? 3 is around the organizations
Mm-hmm.
and how they're making work better, right? These are initiatives to improve culture PR, as I call it often. Um, Merging more into like kind of a diversity and inclusion, probably losing a little of the thread around unleashing creativity in organizations. Um, what was the fourth one? So the fourth one is kind of personal transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this might resonate with you, is kind of the like unleashing the human as the learner, right? Instead of orienting the person as the learner in relationship to an educational institution, right? So we learn in our own now instead of getting a degree or a credential. And
Mm-hmm.
that's slowly happening as well. That's leading to a lot of anxiety for people as well, because they have to own their own path. And
Mm.
then fifth is the deeper questions. These are the questions I'm trying to ask. People like Andrew Taggart have really brought into the consciousness
Mm-hmm.
around total work. What is like Andrew Taggart's question is, are you a worker? right?
Mm-hmm.
Seems silly at first, but then when you think about it, you're like, oh crap, that's everywhere, right? And if you're not a worker, what is the life you want to live,
Mm-hmm.
right? And is your current mode of being sufficient to meeting those demands for the life you actually want to live? Um, those are the 5 conversations I see. And once you start to look at it like that, you kind of realize that the future of work is all these different things. So you can kind of zoom in on any one of those, but you're talking about different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Corporations publish reports saying this is what the future of work looks like. And it always happens that future of work just happens to be within inside a full-time job, right?
Right.
It's, it's like, oh, wow, it's a 5-day-a-week job still? Wow, this is pretty surprising, right?
Yeah.
They haven't really contemplated what the human should be doing, right? They're taking an assumption that the human is meant to work a full-time job, which I don't
Right.
think is a valid thing, and why the future of work conversation feels so empty.
Uh-huh. Say more about that. Say more about that
Yeah,
emptiness.
so there's a future of work person that talks. He has a lot of great stuff. Jacob Morgan. But he starts with the premise of saying you're gonna work your whole life, so you might as well make it meaningful. Those are
Mm-hmm.
2 huge jumps, right? You're going to work your whole life. One, I don't even accept that
Yeah.
because we're probably gonna have to take care of our parents. Um, Men in our generation are gonna probably be more flexible around taking care of children. Um, People do take time off. People have sickness. Like we don't just work our whole lives.
Yeah.
And then the fact that work has to be meaningful. Um, I don't know. Like meaningful work is just such a hard thing to achieve. I haven't really met many people that have meaningful work, at least all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. Meaningful work. Yeah, it's interesting. It's like part of that jump to me feels like since you are going to be working your whole life and it's going to make up such a significant part of your life, you should try and make it meaningful because you're going to be doing it so much. And that's the arena that humans in a capitalist society find meaning now
Right.
because
And
God is dead.
there you go. Yeah, it's basically Protestant work ethic plus Nietzsche plus modern work culture.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it's lacking. It's just not even a valid argument, right? Because we're taking such a leap by saying work is only what you can get paid for.
Mm,
Everyone knows that's not true,
yeah.
right? Anyone who's had a parent take care of them, like that is work, but it's not paid for.
Yeah.
Um, but for some reason, if that parent then goes to work and then hires a nanny, you've done a 2x jump on GDP,
Mm,
right?
mm-hmm.
Um, so maybe both those people can now have meaningful work, but there's something unmeasurable that's lost there.
Mm, yeah. What are uh the unmeasurables that you find particularly uh meaningful in your life these days?
Um,
And maybe it relates to work and maybe it doesn't.
yeah, I think leisure as we get back to it, in the sense that like having space to think and contemplate and tie together things, make
Mm-hmm.
sense of my own life, reflect, just kind of contemplating how crazy our existence is, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think growing up in the US, like, this is much more present in a place like Taiwan, in which, like, the um, religious or spiritual sentiment is much more embedded in day to day life. But nobody in the US really stops and says, like, what the heck are we doing here? Like, we have no idea. It's just like, well, science hasn't figured that out yet, so let's move on.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah.
And just like the contemplation of mystery, that seems like something that was missing earlier in my life.
Uh, yeah. The contemplation of mystery. How are you doing that?
I think meditation, I think creating space, I think writing, um, all are kind of leisure activities for me.
Mm-hmm.
Reading, I find conversations are really powerful. There's always at least one unexpected thing that emerges from a good conversation,
Mm-hmm.
right? I imagine that's why you're drawn to doing this in the first place,
I
right?
started because
It's,
I started this because I was lonely. That's
huh.
that's the only reason. And then it
Yeah,
turned
and
into something else.
what was the surprising thing for you that shifted there?
Um, well, one thing I was struck by was how easy it was to find people to come on the podcast. And I don't know if there's like I mean, I started a year ago. Podcasts have become so much a part of the media cultural landscape now that I think people have an
Hmm.
understanding of what it is. And um, I started just talking to people in my immediate network, and people were super open to setting aside 2 hours and turning off
Yeah.
their phone and just like connecting deeply. And that to me felt like I've been a big podcast listener for many years, and finally I was like, I don't want to continue to passively consume. Like, I want to start creating my own stuff now. I still listen to podcasts, but now it feels more generative.
Yeah. I've found similar things. I think perhaps I wasn't driven. I think maybe I was driven by a certain loneliness as well. But I think what I've found is like one deep conversation is like great for a week
Mm-hmm.
worth of like feeling connected, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've had this thing on my website for 3 years, which says book a curiosity conversation with me.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of what I call hustlepreneurs, right? They talk about you need to protect your time, you need to monetize, you need to make sure people can't reach you, you need to automate. I'm trying to do the opposite. Like if you want to have a
Yeah.
conversation with me and you're curious, just like connect with me.
Uh-huh.
And so I probably have 3 to 4 people reach out a week and just we talk. We talk about their struggles with work. We talk about their ideas. We talk about um, creating things. We talk about the challenges in our life, and it's probably what keeps me so energized and
Yeah.
happy because it's so amazing. Like I just
Yeah.
talk to cool people from around the world.
Yeah. That's
Um,
awesome.
so yeah, I've been doing a podcast for 2 years, and I think I've been surprised too. Almost everyone says yes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it turns into an instant friendship.
Mm-hmm.
Like I imagine if I went to Utah, I'd definitely want to reach out to you now, and I definitely want to hang out with you in person,
Mm. Yeah,
right?
likewise.
Um, and yeah, it's kind of a shadow of what's missing, I think, in the day to day life, and what was missing in my. I'd go to work with people for 50 hours a week, but I might go a whole week without one real conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
And that
So
might be at the heart of kind of what motivates all my writing and thinking, right? Is let's stop talking about the nonsense of meaningful work. Like, there's an emptiness there where we need to grapple with that in a larger perspective,
Yeah.
um, not just at the paid job.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I find myself in these thought spirals sometimes where I start to play out like future collapse scenarios. And sometimes I feel like life is just a training ground to for a training ground for you to um when you're confronted with a situation that is utterly chaotic and deeply upsetting, surprising. Uh, Sometimes I feel like my life is training me for that moment. Like, how am I going to show up in it? You know, like is my nervous system going to shut down, am I going to be completely ineffective, or will I
Yeah,
have the capacity to choose something that's a little bit more responsive?
it seems our generation is almost willing a collapse to happen, right?
Yeah,
Um,
it is
I want
so much part. It's just so in the air, at least in my sort of my circles.
like everyone kind of wants to burn it down, right? Even in yeah, like people want to implement radical new solutions, right? Universal basic income, universal healthcare, um, and you can't do those things without a period of instability, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and the thing is, when challenged, you say, "Well, this is gonna shatter things." People are like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I built that into my assumptions." Um, but I wonder if we've almost had like too much stability. Like the
Yeah,
period, especially as an American, since our childhood, has been one of stability.
dude. Oh my god. Sometimes I think about that all the time actually, of like um the because things were too comfortable. Like if you grow up in like the economic boom of the 80s and 90s, and you're from like just a normal middle class American family,
Right.
and
You crushed it.
your parents weren't complete idiots, you know.
Right. You
It, it,
crushed it.
yeah, and there was like as I reflect back on my childhood, um I almost am like, wow, I'm maladaptive because I there weren't enough periods of instability in my life.
Right.
It's that idea of anti-fragility or like hormesis. Like
Hmm.
there needs to be some stress introduced to the system in order for the possibility of adaptation to even take place.
Yeah, I think there's something there. When so my life had mostly been smooth until I was 27, and I became sick with what they eventually figured out was like Lyme disease and other tick-borne diseases, and
Mm,
I didn't know how to deal with it.
mm-hmm,
Like my life had been too smooth and too good.
mm-hmm.
Um, Not in any grand sense, but just like comfortable.
Yeah.
And anything that went wrong was quickly fixed or taken care of. And I was sick and I dealt with health issues pretty intensely for 2 years. And I look back now and it's one of the things that's made me so resilient and comfortable and enabled me to communicate with emotions in a way I couldn't before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think becoming self-employed has been almost saying I want to inject more shocks into my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the corporate path was almost too comfortable. It's like how could you give up the money and like it's like it, I don't know. It's just there's not a lot there it can teach you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what shocks have you experienced since being on the self-employed path?
Well, what I've found is that it's less shocks than kind of day to day grappling with life.
Mm-hmm.
If you get into a full time job, and I don't know, maybe you've never experienced this, like you probably have always been in this mode, like pursuing acting and stuff, right?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Um,
I've never had
but
a
if
job for more than a year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like if you're in a corporate job in a good company and have some skills, um, you kind of don't think about the day-to-day existential questions. You might every 2 years when you get burnt out and want to look for a new job or something. But self-employment, you wake up every day and you're like, shit, what am I gonna do today? How do I want to spend my day? Am I a loser for not being employed? What is success? Who am I? And I think over time that becomes a feature and not a bug because like those questions are there and kind of the jobs and the comfortable path kind of just hide them from you.
Yeah.
Um, so I really like it because it teaches you to be resilient and teaches you the humility, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, well, I could run out of money. I could quote unquote fail, but not really.
Yeah.
There's enough people around that would help me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and just helps grapple with those questions.
Mm. Do you have any like particular spiritual path or like metaphysical interest at this moment?
I'd say basically mindfulness
Mm-hmm.
practice. I use like a meditation app and do that.
Mm-hmm.
Probably less so now. I actually do it like when I'm visiting in the US, I do it almost every day. In Taiwan, I feel like I'm more in the mix of a different flavor of reality. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't have the words for it right now.
Mm.
But I find it like things are a bit slower here. The essence of things is a bit different. I feel like I am able to be a little more mindful easier here.
Mm-hmm.
Like just going for a walk. It could just be like if you're a white dude in Taiwan, you stick out like crazy and everyone's looking at you. So you're
Mm.
kind of detached from things at all times. So I'm
Mm.
always kind of reflecting on like who am I and then not being able to talk fully. I can speak a little Chinese, but
Uh-huh.
not well. I can't shoot the shit in Chinese.
Yeah.
So I'm always kind of reflecting and mindful of what the heck am I doing here? Who am
Yeah.
I? But yeah. So it's very constant needing to reflect on. So I don't know if that's a spiritual practice yet, being a white dude in Taiwan. But it definitely forces constant questioning. Um, and I think writing and then conversations are probably part of a practice.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Here's a pretty broad question for you. This is
Yeah,
something
go
I've been
ahead.
thinking about lately. Is what do you make of the intersection between religion and technology? What are some things that like immediately pop into your mind when you hear those two things put together?
Ooh, that's just got scared.
Scared?
Cults. Um, I'm listening to this uh, podcast called The Missing Crypto Queen. Have you listened to this?
No, I just saw you tweet about it though. I haven't listened to it.
Yeah, so it's basically the intersection of technology and religion, right?
Ah.
Uh, this woman and her brother basically started a cult around
Uh-huh.
a crypto, um, like a fake crypto coin because they never actually built a blockchain. They just kept taking more and more money. It's a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
But they basically like can't unwind it because if people believe too deeply in the coin as like a avenue for a different way of living life.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't think I have anything too useful or insightful to say on technology and religion, mostly because I haven't thought about it a lot. But
Mm.
I think what we're seeing, like you see it on Twitter, is people are desperately searching for like meme worlds to dive into, right?
Yeah. Have you are
Um,
you, have you been introduced to like wholesome Twitter? People that are just like so earnest, so earnest and just like hearts on their sleeve, just like totally open for
yeah,
like sending out love and like needing it back.
yeah.
It's really fascinating to see.
I think I've seen parts of that. I might be guilty of being part of that too. Like
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
I'm really interested in just being more earnest.
Yeah.
I grew up with a deep cynicism and sarcasm, and I was actually thinking about this yesterday, and I was wondering like, is that just a very valid response to being in like a very intense competitive like capitalist world, right?
Yeah.
If you're always worried about being like screwed by someone or taken advantage of or not getting paid your worth, if those are your modes of being, like you kind of need cynicism and sarcasm to navigate everything.
Oh, yeah. Especially if you're looking to, I think it's such an it's a natural part of the human condition to look above, to look and see who are at the stages of life that are above you, looking for guidance. And in a like godless market economy, like uh late stage capitalism, the examples you see most often uh, uh, can lead to cynicism. Just like
Yeah,
you got to
and
do what you do to get by.
so I guess interested in like wholesome life because I've been outside of the US for a year and a half now, and I think the US needs everyone needs a hug.
Yeah.
Like I the reason I was thinking this train of thought is yesterday I was or 2 days ago I was at a museum with my wife's family,
Uh-huh.
and we were just getting lunch at a museum. So if you went to a museum and in the U.S. and got lunch, what would you expect to pay? You would expect to pay more, right? Because they would upcharge everything, right? Because you're
Hmm.
stuck in the museum.
Yeah.
This the price was the same as I would buy like on the street, maybe a little more. And I'm just like, nobody tries to make more here as a default response. And generally, I feel like my cynicism and sarcasm is fading away, and like I've had to withdraw from some of my group texts from U.S. friends because it's just like cynicism, which borders on like just cruelness.
Yeah.
And I really am interested in like how can we just be nicer to people?
Yeah. I know. Yeah. How can you create the conditions where kindness like emerges and it naturally,
Yeah,
you know? You don't have
like
to force it. It just sort of comes.
yeah, like in the U.S., it's like people are like, oh, we're just debating. It's fun. It's like why do we have to do this? Like, let's there's a difference between like this both sides of like I need to disagree with you and this is my point and this is your point, and it's like I'm just losing interest in that.
Yeah.
I want to have conversations that are more meandering and nuanced, and
Yeah.
I
Well,
think that's what I've discovered is just like like living in a place like Taiwan, like you realize reality is way more malleable than like I think I was raised with. I was raised with like there's the right answer and there's the wrong answer, and it's like
uh-huh.
it's not true. There's so
Yeah.
many different ways of being and ways of operating in the world.
one thing that I've been observing a bit on Twitter is there've been a couple large spats, uh, like conflicts that emerge, and then name calling happens, and then someone blocks someone. And I was thinking about that. And I was like, you hear this term like civil discourse that's propped up a lot. Like we got to maintain civil discourse, and there's something about it to me that feels like kind of hypocritical in our neoliberal society where our government lies to us and like tortures people in secret, and civil discourse is kind of like held up as this ideal
Right.
that if two people genuinely disagree on such a fundamental level, that rather than trying to find pleasantries or find a common ground, like maybe it's just more honest to have a spat of name calling and then Twitter blocks. I don't know. I was just
Yeah.
wondering about that. It's like would it be better for someone to come in and mediate this conversation, or is it just okay that some people can't stand each other and don't want to interact?
Well, I think it's an interesting thing, right? Operating in a digital world's way different than operating in the real world. In the real world, you have tons of people who have different beliefs than you.
Yeah.
And you kind of respect that. That's like a normal thing. But once we go digital, we can just connect with all the people that have modes of being that are comfortable to us.
Hmm.
And I mean, some people have said like there is no loneliness epidemic, like the data is just not there, and people might actually be happier with drawing from like either their families or friends who they just violently disagree with, and you can kind of go
Right.
digital and find all the people you connect with. Um, and yeah, I think we're in like a very confusing time because we don't know the answers to these things.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think it's figuring out if you can go online and find all these people that agree with you in one similar direction, and then you go offline, you're almost becoming disconnected from the people you might have formerly been close to, right?
Hmm.
Um, like, I find that there's a wide spectrum of like political beliefs in my family, but nobody talks about politics in my family, really,
Hmm.
because we are all just like used to being with each other and having fun and talking about other stuff,
Hmm.
right? Um, yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that.
One question I have for you is, I was just thinking about the difference between digital relating versus in real life community. And as somebody that has become an expat, and you've built this like um, grounded existence in Taiwan, how do you think about like what's your sort of long term vision or goals for community, both like in person and online?
Yeah, so right now, like the online component is a necessary outlet for me. So I can have conversations like this.
Hmm.
Um, like there are other expats here, but I still crave like just the more like westernized conversations, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, and those still bring me alive in a certain way. It also helps me just engage with English speakers. So besides my partner, I can go days without speaking English to anyone.
Hmm.
Like I just go to the market and speak Chinese or um, just be around people speaking Chinese. So it's probably a necessary outlet for me. Um, yeah, moving forward, like me and my wife talk about this a lot. So we're actually leaving Taiwan in uh, the end of February and gonna go full nomad for a couple of years
Sweet.
and basically try out different communities around the world because we want to make friends and find people that we can connect with and build lives with or
Mm-hmm.
at least share notes.
Yeah.
Um, because she's from Taiwan, I'm from the US. And if we go into the default mode of work, we're going to have to pick one location and work 48 weeks of the year
Mm-hmm.
and either not see one of our families. Um, and we don't really want that. So we're trying to design work around being able to be in both places for extended periods. Um, but also having the communities that we can kind of connect with as well. Um, and I don't really have good answers. We're hopefully going to figure it out over the next couple of years.
Mm-hmm. What are some things that you uh what are some things that you see as positive in a communal living situation or in a in-person community?
Uh, so I kind of grew up with this. I grew up in a small town, and nobody locks their doors, and everyone kind of knows each other, and you can basically just drop in anyone's place at any time. Uh, so always having an open door. So I've had this kind of mindset of any friend, anytime can always stay with me. I'm never too busy, right? A lot of people default in the mode like first it's like, well, I need to clean my place before people come over. And then next you just never have anyone coming over
Mm-hmm.
because people learn that they need to give you a heads up and can't just pop by and it's like it's not even worth it. Um, so I try to connect with people that have that mode similarly. Like if you're in
Mm-hmm.
Taiwan, you have a place to stay.
Mm-hmm.
Boom, done. Whenever. Just show
Mm-hmm.
up. I will like I need maybe 15 minutes notice to be home and let you in. But this is how I want to operate. So my family now, it's my grandmother has a house here. My mom lives right behind them. My aunt lives next door. And then my other aunt lives half a mile away. And then my cousin lives on that same street. And then his grandfather lives on the street as well. And people just pop, like when I'm home in Connecticut, people just pop in. Like they drive up our driveway and just walk in our house.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's really where I get my mindset about community. And I want to embrace that moving
Mm-hmm.
forward. And I realize some people don't embrace that. Um, and I see that as a symptom of kind of our modern way of living is like, I need my own space. Um, I need to clean before people come. Um, I don't want to host people. It's such a hassle of other stuff to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we're missing something.
Yeah. Yeah, because there aren't really spaces built in for in community anymore for people to see to be a mess. You
Right.
know,
Oh,
like
interesting. Yeah.
there's not really opportunity for you to lose your shit in front of a group of people and
Huh.
trust that it's going to be okay.
Yeah,
And I
that's
don't know,
interesting.
like the nuclear family might have something to do with it, and um, our like lack of cohesive religious culture, other than like ironic Christianity. It, that seems like a huge part of it is not trusting that you'll be safe if you lose your shit. So you have to just kind of put on a good face and be like presentable for people to like you or accept you or something.
Yeah. That's it. I mean, you moved around a lot growing up. How did you find kind of fitting into different communities and environments?
Mm. Um, well, I grew up in a Mormon culture till I was 8, and that is just like built-in
Yeah.
friendship, built-in community. Um, but then after that, it was after that I think it was orienting around specific interests. Like I got really into theater, and so I had a built-in community of like other weirdos who like to sing and dance. So that was like but yeah, even in high school, like I had a theater community that was not part of my school, and then I had my school friends that I had like a specific identity with. And did you have that experience when growing up, like you had like two different social circles and like you could not imagine them ever being in the same room together?
Mm, maybe maybe in college, but I grew up in a really small town, so there was like one
Hmm.
circle.
Okay.
Um, yeah, yeah, but definitely as an adult, you kind of have different friends for different modes.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting. Hmm. So, what are some like big questions that take up a lot of your time these days? Maybe in your leisure time. Like, what are some things that you're grappling with that you could use like a sparring partner in this moment for?
Yeah, um, I think a lot about what are the paths to help people deal with some of the deep insecurities they feel
Hmm.
around money, um, connection, belonging, and mostly centered around work. So people don't seem to grok that the skill of learning how to make a lot of money doesn't actually teach you how to be comfortable with money
Mm.
or not having it, right? It
Hmm.
actually might undermine it, like acquiring more money. Um, thinking about, a lot about that. I'm thinking a lot about meaning. Like, what are the modes of making meaning? I think we've had these generic default paths of meaning making, and they were actually really effective because everyone believed in them.
Hmm.
Now, our generation is a bit cynical on them. And I think because of that, the meaning has fallen apart. There's other factors too, like a lot of jobs are in cities now, and it's just harder to build a life around those in those worlds.
Hmm.
But what does meaning look like in that sense? And I think like watching John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, and I actually have like a weekly conversation with a friend where we kind of just go through these ideas, try to make sense of what is what is happening.
Hmm.
That's been really useful. Um, but yeah, it's the question of like, why are we so obsessed with work in our modern world? And I don't have a good answer to this.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think it will probably take another couple years of my life. But we talk so much about how can we improve work, right? How can we make organizations better? How can we give people more meaningful work? What if we just worked a 4 day week and gave people a day of their life back and said, build your own meaning, right? You have a day now, go explore, right?
Hmm.
There'd be a period of people like, what the hell do I do with my time? I'm going to start a side business now on my 5th day. But I think over time, people would just say, all right, there's a little more life to explore, a little more other things we can work on.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. What would that look like for you? What's
I'm
like
already kind
the
of living it.
yeah?
Um, yeah, I think most days I have the option to do whatever I want. Like I live a very simple life. My cost of living is very low. Um, I have like this course that covers my cost of living, and I try to keep it pretty simple. So I'd say probably over the past year, I'd say maybe 300 days of the year, I've been able to just kind of wake up and go do a bike ride or quote unquote not work.
Hmm.
Um, and that's pretty amazing. I think what I do with my time is I look for people to help. So I volunteer. I say, how can I help? Um, in Taiwan, I've kind of volunteered my time like several times to like help people with English, help people with jobs, and just kind of see what happens. Um, help at different like startup events. Like one of the big things is like just helping people with basic business knowledge or helping them communicate in English. And sharing some tips and things around that. I'm just seeing like where I can play and experiment and help. Um, I yeah, so I'm doing it like I don't really plan too much week to week. I kind of just let it flow. Like Monday and Tuesday, I spent time with my partner's family. We went and visited her ancestors.
Mm.
Um, so just did that. And I think we feel like we're lucky. She's a fitness trainer and has a very flexible schedule. So we can kind of design most of our days to around how we want to spend it.
Mm.
And it's been like our early relationship has mostly been centered around that. So we're kind of like, we kind of have to do this the rest of our lives, right? We're like, what would happen if we were both working full-time jobs? Like, how do people have relationships in that context? It's very hard.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, that's an interesting that's an interesting rabbit hole to go down. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
like, right? If you had kids and work full-time and both couples are working, a lot of your relationship is just coordinating and optimizing
mm-hmm.
instead of like, I mean, we kind of just passed out and took a nap in the middle of the day yesterday. And we're like, I think it's been interesting because we're both like going on this mindfulness journey and just talking about things. And we're both like, wow, that was really cool. Right?
Yeah, that
Just
is
the
cool.
privilege of doing that in the middle of the day is just amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So, do you see part of your work as helping people? Like, if people are interested in designing a life that optimizes for these values that you're talking about, do you see part of your work as helping people to create that for themselves?
Yeah, I think mostly I'm trying to figure it out for myself, but I think I think I'm very lucky. Like I have this like past work experience in which I know I can get certain types of jobs or gigs to kind of pay the bills. I've always been less stressed than others about money and needing to be quote unquote successful.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives me a little more freedom to kind of play and
Mm-hmm.
experiment. Like I've I've made money in the last year through freelance consulting, one-on-one coaching, writing a report, um, freelance writing, online courses. Um, I'm probably missing some things like random Patreon things,
Mm-hmm.
random gifts people have sent me. Um, so I keep wanting to experiment with different modes of working such that I can help other people get started, right? What
Mm-hmm.
I've found is one of the most interesting things is helping people take action on creative projects.
Mm-hmm.
So, like launching a podcast, starting a blog, writing something, and just doing that seems to awaken this like inner joy, inner bliss, inner confidence in people that says, like, if I can publish this, like, there's all these other things I can do.
Mm-hmm.
And I've helped a bunch of people over the last year just like launch things or just like build the courage or the context to make sense of what they're actually doing, right? Um, and I try to explore these from a deeper angle of the goal here is not to become successful, right? Because what I observe is if you write about things and you say, I will help you make famous, I'll help you get more followers, you can get a lot of people to pay you for that and sign up. I don't really care about that. I want to help people navigate that inner gap of I'm really scared to do something and how do I get past that
Mm-hmm.
like gap or that chasm of fear, right? And that's really hard. And I rather like quietly help 50 people do that and not make any money from it. Uh, because it just brings people so much freaking joy. Like, I imagine you felt something like this in starting the podcast, right? Like, what I've seen is people have this experience of starting a podcast and thinking, I need it to be successful. Or what if people don't listen? What if people make fun of me? And then you do like 5 to 10 episodes, and then you're like, oh my God, I was totally underestimating what I was capable of. I was totally underestimating all these opportunities I didn't know existed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I became good at something I didn't expect.
Yeah.
And then you're like, what else am I not
Yeah. Yeah.
imagining for my life?
Yeah. People have given me jobs from like just by listening to this podcast. Like I
Yeah.
haven't advertised skills. What I've done is just like put myself out there, asked a few good questions, and just like made myself available.
Well, what you're demonstrating is you're just willingness to start something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and people will reach out in these curiosity conversations I have and say, oh, wow, I can't believe you just like talk to people. I'm like, I'm just another dude. I just
Yeah.
happen to like face the fear of putting stuff out in the world and just keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing is, you're capable. We're all capable of this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like my favorite example is like parenting. Like, that's one of the scariest things in the world, but we just keep doing it over and over and over again for all of history.
Mm-hmm.
Like, starting a podcast is not scary compared to like having a child show up, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're all capable of that.
Yeah. Are you thinking? You don't have kids, right?
No.
Is
Maybe,
it in the cards?
yeah, probably in the next few years.
Cool.
Because I think it's like, it's one of life's probably most fun challenges, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
And there's also like, you have to be crazy to have a kid too, because they're probably going to dislike you for something.
Yeah.
But you're
There's
going to
gonna be a
be,
chunk of their life where they might resent you,
or
you know,
the whole thing.
or the whole life. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, yeah, we're definitely thinking about that.
Hmm. What does it mean to raise a kid in this time, in this time in history, this place? Are there new considerations that new parents need to have, or is it, or have, or is it just like is there a universal element that is just like
Yeah.
it's a thread that connects all humans?
I think people overthink this stuff. I think like the Western
Hmm.
American conversation is more around like, oh, it's so hard to raise kids. What they're talking about is the it's harder to raise a future high income earning successful kid, right?
Yeah. Oh God, it's gonna be so hard to get my kid into this fucking college.
It's
Yeah.
like, I don't know. I didn't grow up with that. Like,
Hmm.
I started thinking about college junior year of high school. And I think like raising a kid is about like, I'd be most concerned about them being funny and likable.
Uh, yeah.
Um, the rest, I don't know. Figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Seems like something that sort of sorts itself out.
Yeah. But yeah.
Cool. Well, we've been going for a little more than an hour. Are there any other things, any other questions or topics that are sort of top of mind that you want to cover before we end?
Trying to think. I just enjoy the kind of podcast format. It feels like we kind of meandered all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
it, this conversation kind of I kind of think I'm going to be wandering around thinking about some of the loose ends for the rest of the day. And I think that's what a good conversation is.
Mm.
Um,
What are some of the loose ends?
like, what is community?
Yeah.
What are my modes of kind of contemplating that I'm exploring?
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, starting creative things, different things like that.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what is most energizing for you these days?
Um, I mean, basically all those things that you just mentioned. Uh, um, uh, Community is a huge one. Um, uh, Balance between prioritizing building digital online community versus in person.
Yeah.
How those two interface and what the values of or what the value of like embodied connection is versus like the network effect connection of being able to relate to people across the globe. So just one of the questions is like how do I prioritize like which of those which connections to put more time into and that kind of thing. Um, but technology and religion, mythology, like these are definitely things I'm thinking about.
Yeah. There's a really good Vox episode on cults,
Uh-huh.
um, on Netflix, which you might get a kick out of. But basically, their framing on cults is saying it's not really a cult. It's just like they're all religious. Like if a cult becomes mainstream, it then becomes a religion, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I don't know like what are the elements that make up a cult? Like one of them seems to be there's a charismatic
yeah, right,
patriarch or matriarch. It's usually a patriarch. But
right.
so
Well,
and
sometimes a matriarch. I mean, this one coin. You got to listen to this crypto queen episode.
okay.
But yeah, this one queen is around a woman. Um, like the wild wild country that was around a powerful woman, right?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, there was Bhagwan, but then Sheila was kind of the she was making all the moves.
Yeah.
She was calling all the shots. Bhagwan was just kind of hanging out in his Bentleys.
But I think you're onto something. Like, I think this is something interesting to explore because, in a sense, I think we need religions. We need a
Yeah.
different mode of like spirituality of meaning making, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
like the um, I forget somebody talked about I wrote something down. So somebody was talking about laziness on Twitter, right? And
Yeah.
I think um, there's this tangential term called acedia,
Yeah. What's that?
and you basically it's kind of like this internal it's kind of like nihilism, except it's this loss of interest in the thing you're doing, even though you're doing it.
Uh-huh.
So it's kind of like a moving laziness, right? It's like you actually are doing something, but there's this kind of inner despair or disconnect because you're not
Uh,
actively engaged with it. And we've kind of lost the nuance between a number of these different terms. Um, like we see laziness as the opposite of doing. So if you're just doing anything, it's worthwhile,
hmm.
right? I don't know where I'm going with this. I don't know if this connects
Oh.
back to what we're talking about.
Oh, rather than like very consciously intentionally doing nothing
Right.
versus
So,
doing something mindlessly.
yeah, so I think what I was getting to is there's kind of a disconnect. Like we're doing things in the doer mode, right? And there's no connection to anything deeper or spiritual anymore, or like an interconnectedness of like what you actually want to be doing, right?
Hmm.
So, yeah, yeah, that's another word I've discovered from Andrew Taggart. Just a different way of framing around like idleness versus acedia versus leisure versus active.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and it appears like there doesn't appear to be much like in Taiwan like the meaning crisis just doesn't resonate as much because like spirituality is more ingrained in culture rather than in religions. Like,
Yeah.
I think people have abandoned religions for a really good reason, right? Because like the institutions are corrupt and
Corrupt. Yeah. Corrupt to the
basically
core in a lot of cases.
just not as valid anymore. There's
Yeah.
um and but we still need the like spiritual modes. And
Yeah.
this is why people join cults, join political tribes, join yoga retreats and things, right? Because
Yeah.
we still need this other sense making mode of like what is happening in the world.
Right. Right. I just had this conversation with this guy today he was talking about all this in-depth research that he did into game theory. And
Mm.
basically his research led him to this insight that um like, okay, what's beyond the prisoner dilemma tit for tat mode? And it's basically like, how do you optimize for trusting and cooperating with the stranger? And his big aha moment was
Mm.
like, oh my God, I just like found religion through game theory.
Yeah.
Like, okay, yeah,
Yeah, that's
religion
like
has
Jesus's story, right? Connecting with the stranger.
yeah, loving the how do you love the stranger? And that to me is like, I mean, along with climate change, that seems like one of the big issues of the day. The big
Yeah.
sort of tasks is how do you figure out how to love people that are outside of your tribe?
Yeah, and I think the thing is most people know how to do this. I think because of a certain way like mainstream media is set up, and it becomes cliche to say this, but you look at the Hidden Tribes report in the U.S. and it's like 8% of people are like radical political people, and then like
Yeah.
92% of the people are like, just gonna go about our lives.
Yeah.
And
Right.
we think the world is in war and like, and the thing is like everyone thinking everything is messed up reinforces itself, right? But the reality
Yeah.
is like most people are just getting about their lives.
Yeah.
And we need almost like we need a way of acknowledging this, that like, yeah, most
Yeah.
people are just doing like most people are doing this, right? Like having just conversation
Mm-hmm.
of like in a generous way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I really appreciated the meandering nature of this conversation. Like I walked in with no real agenda, just wanted to connect and hear a little bit about who you are and what you're doing, and I appreciated our time together.
For sure. Well, I appreciate your exploring too. I think I listened to a few of your episodes and I liked how you went from like serious podcaster mode to like not giving a fuck. And now it seems it seems like you've evolved almost to like a third stage of even more like calm contentness of just like opening to the conversation. So I don't know if you're noticing those own self evolution, but
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that insight. I don't want to lose the there's like a kind of jokester or trickster part of my
yeah,
personality that sometimes I feel like I've suppressed in like serious podcast mode. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I gotta pull the stick out of my ass and like actually just like be a normal person. But I mean, that's part of the beauty of podcasting is you get to iterate and like fail in
yeah,
public, and
right.
it just goes into your archive, and it's just like we're continuing, we're moving forward. It doesn't even matter.
Yeah, I've played with that too. Like people will meet me in person who've only like listened to my podcast and they're like, "Wow, you're way less serious than I thought."
Yeah.
But yeah, cool.
All right, Paul. Well, I'll put all your links. I'll post your website and everything. Is there anything else that you want to plug before we sign off here?
No, if you're curious about the questions, let me know what you think. Find me on Twitter. Just search Paul Millard. You'll find me anywhere. I'm
Cool.
kind of the only one with a D at the end of my Miller.
All right. All right, Paul. Thanks so much for coming on. I'll talk to you later.
See you later.
All right. Bye, man.